Hello everyone, I'm recording once again another mini lesson. This time the title of this mini lesson is Writing a Mystery Story Part 1. As you can imagine, there's going to be a Part 2 as well for next week. So let's start. Okay, the contents. So the first part is the Freytags Pyramid. Well, I'm not going to discuss this much in detail because I did last class or the last mini lesson, and the idea here is that we could use it to give you some tips, and the tips are going to be the ones that describe here in the part 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to discuss something about structuring chapters or paragraphs, a strong hook, and when you write you have to keep in mind the detective reader also, and what are the red herrings. So let's start by looking at the Freytags Pyramid. Okay, so if you remember, the first two sections are exposition and rising action, and these two sections are the ones that I'm going to cover in this mini lesson, and the other three, climax, falling action, resolution, we'll leave them for the next mini lesson. Okay, so let's remember a bit what the exposition is about. So the exposition tells us who the characters are, where the story takes place, and some background information. Okay, all of the information that we actually need to understand the story and the presentation of the conflict. We start looking at the rising action with the inciting incident. All right, so this inciting incident, if you remember the Six Napoleons, is the murder that happens in chapter 3. From that event and on, a series of happenings build the story until we get to the climax. Okay, so the chapters that belong to the rising action section were 3, 4, 5, and 6. As you can imagine, this is a lot. So we have to write down a lot of rising action and enough material in the exposition so the story makes sense, right? That's basically the advice here. So let's start looking at the first tip, which is well-structured chapters or paragraphs. So the first tip is to plan the structure of the story thinking about the main events. So here again I mentioned the example of the Six Napoleons because if you remember there were 9 chapters. The first 2 were exposition, then the following 4 chapters were rising action, 1 chapter for climax, 1 chapter for falling action, and 1 chapter for resolution. And that's it, you see? So in this presentation we're dealing pretty much with the first 2 main sections, which are exposition and rising action. So for these chapters, it is suggested that you open in the middle of an unknown setting or open your chapter or paragraph in the middle of a tense situation. So then in that way, you will be building action, you see. Begin with the discovery that something previously thought true was false. That's also another very good tip. A strong hook. Well, if you didn't know what a hook is, if you look at the image, now you will understand. And the idea is that you ask yourself these questions at the beginning of each chapter. For instance, does it grab the reader's interest immediately? Does it pose a question the reader will strongly want answered? For example, in the Six Napoleons, in the very first chapter, there is the question, what's going on in London? Why someone will be breaking these busts of Napoleon made of plaster, right? Another one, does it contain dramatic potential? That means an imminent conflict, loss, discovery of something that will turn your main character's world upside down. The dramatic potential is important because from the very beginning we should know that this is not going to be a boring story, that we will answer everything right in the first paragraph. So it's important that the story has dramatic potential. The detective reader. So the detective reader, is the one that discovers the clues that the writer is given. Okay, so you have to leave clues throughout, but not too obvious. Also include both type of characters, the truthful and liars, leaving it to the reader to decide whose information seems more honest. Okay, and have multiple possible explanations. In a murder mystery, for example, that means having multiple suspicious characters. Okay, so it's important that you write the story considering that the detective reader or the reader itself wants to find out uh, who committed the crime. So you have to provide certain clues, but not everything is honest clues. Let's look at this. Red herrings. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, a red herring is a clue or piece of information which is or is intended to be misleading or distracting. Well, we just talked about that we need to give clues to the detective reader, but including a red herring, it's also important. Why? Red herrings can be scattered throughout your novel to keep the reader from guessing the culprit of a crime or explanation of a disappearance too soon. They escalate tension and suspense and make a novel more fascinating. So, as I said before, it's important to include clues, but also like these wrong clues or misleading, right? Why? Because it makes the novel more interesting or your writing more fascinating. That's the reason. So, no more tips. I'm going to leave this presentation up to here, and I would like to see you soon that we get in touch, and I hope that this lesson has been helpful for all of you. All right, thanks for watching. Goodbye.